All right, welcome everyone to the Remnant of Israel channel here on YouTube. This is our final episode in the Jailbreak series that we're doing, and you're welcome to download this book for free at www.fromjeremiahtojesus.com. In fact, all my books are there, and feel free to download all of them if you want to. Today we're going to be in chapter 14 and then real quickly into 15, and it should, like I said, this should be the final episode of this series. So what we're going to cover mainly, and I hope we've got enough for a whole hour. Something tells me this is going to be a short video, but hey, maybe that's good because people's attention spans are terrible anymore, so the shorter the better apparently. But we're going to be covering the historical evidence. You know, if the Christian church, if what we're telling you is true, there should be some history that you can point to, you know, some books or something that you can look to that are going to be backing up this same kind of an idea that Israel, or that the church is Israel, basically. That's the basic theme of this whole series, all these videos that we've done, is that the church is Israel. And Israel is not Israel. So, and that goes along with what Paul said, all Israel is not Israel. And it doesn't make any sense to you until you realize exactly what it is he's talking about. So, is there any historical evidence? Well, absolutely there is, and we're going to cover some of this right now. So, you want to start right there? Hopefully this microphone setup's going to work. I seem to have pretty good levels over here. We'll see what you've got and try to adjust accordingly. Anyway, go ahead.
All right, chapter 14. Historical evidence. Is there any historical evidence that shows the church used to believe itself to be Israel? If my position is correct, then it would be logical to assert that a history of it could be found. Therefore, in this chapter, I will cover some of the historical data that does indeed support this position. Before we begin, it should be clear that the first stop in our brief look into history has already been addressed. Yes, the Apostle Paul himself clearly believed this and taught it as I have described within the pages of this very book. However, after the time of Paul's inspired words, we are only left with the opinions of men. Therefore, we should not be surprised to find errors developing within the belief structure, but this shouldn't negate our ability to show a central theme, and as you will see, it doesn't. Actually, the only real stumbling block to uncovering this history is to get past the middle 19th century to a time before John Nelson Darby and company unleashed the idea of the pre-tribulation rapture on us. If you go back before this time, the idea that Christians or Israel can be found in many different places.
You know, this is so true. Just want to interject here for a second. And that was the real key. If you go back to, let's say, 1880, you're not going to find anything. You're going to find a little bit, but not much. You're gonna, you know, and I've got some examples in the book that show that, but they're few and far between. The closer you get to present day, the less you see. and the farther back you go, I think I've got one here at 1850, the first one, as a matter of fact, 1850. You start to see this idea. Darby came in, about 1830? So by 1880, 1890, instead of, you had your rapture theme stuff more and more prevalent. So what we're doing, we're trying to get back into before 1830. Ultimately, is what we're trying to do. And once you do that, these are everywhere. I got pastors' speeches and stuff, sermons that they make, and even, of course, we're going to get to all this. But I just wanted to say, it just amazed me that how blinded we've become to our own history. Even the idea of the pilgrims when they came over, and the whole western migration of America, all of that manifest destiny, basically is what they called it. But all that was based on the idea that America was the new Israel, we were the Christians. We were Israel coming over, and it just, there's no doubt about it. It's just amazing. And anyway, I'll try not to interrupt anymore.
Let's begin in the year 1850 with two very popular writers of the day, and you will see that even in the secular literature, we find the idea that the Christians were analogous to Israel. In the Scarlet Letter written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, 1850, we read, "The Puritans quickly came to believe that a high and glorious destiny awaited the newly gathered people of the Lord in the New England which they were planting in the wilderness. Here it is evident that a close comparison of the Puritans to ancient Israel was believed. The early settlers found many parallels between themselves and Israel, and as such the contemporary writers of the day picked up on the idea and used it in their works."
See, that's the thing. These aren't all just Christian pastors. These are just right like Nathaniel Hawthorne here. I mean, I don't know if he was a Christian or not, but he was a secular writer. And so the beliefs of the society, he wove that into his work. And part of that was the fact that the Puritans believed that they were planning, the newly gathered people of the Lord, is what he says. That's a direct quote.
Right.
And so they felt like they were Israel. They were to take the land exactly the way Joshua took it, and that's why the Indians had to die. And terrible as that is or was, that's what they believed. They considered the Indians to be the Canaanites.
Yeah, they're just going about it the wrong way.
Going about it the wrong way. They didn't understand that they were spiritually Israel, not physically.
Right. Another example comes from Herman Melville, the famed author of Moby Dick. He wrote in his book, White Jacket, the following: "And we Americans are the peculiar chosen people, the Israel of our time. We bear the ark of the liberties of the world." In 1850, the term American was nearly synonymous with Christian, so therefore we are not surprised to find Melville using this rather common terminology to describe the point of view that the early American Christian settlers were the Israel of our time.
See, I mean, it's just right there. There's no decoding that, it just flat out tells you. He believed, or in that particular book, he made the point, plain as day, that we're the Israel of our time. So,
moving along, we find references to this belief in the works of Samuel Langdon, 1797. Pastor Langdon was an American Congregational clergyman who served as president of Harvard University from 1774 to 1780. In his speech entitled "The Republic of the Israelites, an Example to the American States," we read, "And now, my fellow citizens and much honored fathers of the state, you may be ready to ask, to what purpose is this long detail of an antiquated history on this public occasion? I answer, examples are better than precepts, and history is the best instructor both in polity and morals. I have represented you with the portrait of a nation highly favored by heaven with civil and religious institutions, who yet, by not improving their advantages, forfeited their blessings and brought contempt and destruction on themselves. If I am not mistaken, instead of the 12 tribes of Israel, we may substitute the 13 states of the American Union."
So see, they're taking it even farther, and obviously the secular writers are as well. That not just really, they're not speaking as much about the spiritual Israel like we are right now in these broadcasts, but they're definitely under the realization, of course, that we made earlier, that American was really synonymous with Christian. You back in those days, it was, if you weren't a Christian, you were quite the outcast. So it's not like it is today. And with that with that reasoning, you can see that they still believed it. And again, that's why they made the mistake with the Trail of Tears and everything, the destruction of all the Indian tribes. Was this idea that they knew they were Israel, but they didn't really have their minds around what that really meant in the spirit. And of course, they went about it physically, and that's why we're in the mess we are today. But still, another clear reference that, instead of the 12 tribes, we're substitute the 13 states. I mean, how much more clear could it be?
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is 1797, or roundabout. So we're well beyond Darby and the pre-tribulation rapture lie that we got in around 1830. So we should see a lot of good examples coming up.
In the closing comments of a speech entitled "The United States Elevated to Glory and Honor," we read of the wishes of one Ezra Stiles, D.D., 1795. Pastor Stiles was a Congregationalist minister who served as the president of Yale University from 1778 to 1795. In the speech delivered at Hartford, Connecticut, during the annual election of the governor, state representatives, and senators, he says, "And while this honorable House is attending to the secular concerns of civil government, may we not humbly wish that you would not repudiate the idea of being nursing fathers to our spiritual Israel, the Church of God within this state."
Okay, there you go. A direct reference. This ain't out of the Bible. This is out Pastor Stiles. It starts saying Langdon. Pastor Stiles here, the president of Yale University. I mean, imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
Making a direct reference to spiritual Israel. So he understood. He understood.
Yeah. Both of these men were respected pastors, educators, and leaders of their day, and they clearly espoused the belief that those in the church were Israelites. In fact, during Pastor Stiles' speech, he comes right out and declares that the Church of God is our spiritual Israel. In his work, "The Bloody Tenant, washed and made white in the blood of the Lamb," Pastor John Cotton describes Massachusetts as analogous to ancient Israel, with its judges as Israel's ancient leaders. One quote from this work states, "For I demand, did not Christ himself, who was the chief sower, did not he preach and sow the seed of the word to all those four sorts of hearers? And yet he was the minister of circumcision," Romans 15:8, "and preached seldom to any, but to church members of the Church of Israel."
So there you go. And I just want to make a real quick point. This being the old English that it is, and we're way back in the 1700s here. The Bloody. Of course, that's how it's written here. Of course, today we would obviously say bloody, but the Bloody Tenant, and it just when you say it that way, it kind of gives you that old English feel, the Bloody, and so I kind of like that. But I wanted to point that out just in case someone listening and they're not actually reading along, they may not have understood what you were saying there. So, anyway.
All right. In a sermon entitled "The Divine Right to Occupy the Land," Pastor John Cotton describes many similarities between the ancient Israelites and the Puritans, and he illustrates his belief that it was God's will for the Puritans to occupy the land as they deemed proper. In his book, God's New Israel, Conrad Cherry takes a historical look at how the belief influenced these and other early American settlers. A segment from this book reads, "Promised land imagery figured prominently in shaping English colonial thought. The Pilgrims identified themselves with the ancient Hebrews. They viewed the New World as the New Canaan. They were God's chosen people headed for the Promised Land. Other colonists believed they, too, had been divinely called. The settlers in Virginia were, John Rolfe said, a peculiar people, marked and chosen by the finger of God." Conrad Cherry, God's New Israel, Religious Interpretations of American Destiny, manifest destiny. As I mentioned earlier, many disturbing errors arose within this concept of being God's chosen people. First and foremost, among them was that the believers often tried to manifest their chosen people status in a physical fashion. You see, in the same way that the physical Jews are no longer chosen, neither are the physical Americans, nor the physical British, nor anyone else. No one has chosen flesh. The chosen people are simply not a fleshly people anymore. The early settlers would have been wise to have seen this. However, many did not see it, but instead they used the error as an excuse to exterminate many native peoples.
Okay, I'm actually going into this here in the book, and we talked about it just a few minutes ago, so that's good. I'm glad I was able to write this, and it's a lot more clear. It seems like a lot of times when I try to describe something on a broadcast like this, it never comes out as clear as I mean for it to. But here in the book, I think it's going to cover it quite nicely. So anyway, I'm just glad to see that. Been a while since I've read it.
As I have shown, during the founding of America, the belief that the church was Israel was very common, and when many individuals hold the same belief, it usually grows into a large movement. One of the largest of these movements was known as Manifest Destiny, and this idea was able to overtake much of the early American thought. The idea was simply this, that the American Christians, as God's chosen people, should take the land from the sea to sea, in the same fashion that Israel conquered the Promised Land. They were to conquer North America just as Joshua had conquered those living in Canaan. While this movement ultimately resulted in the establishment of our nation's borders as we know them today, it also unfortunately resulted in the massacre of many indigenous peoples. Yes, the reason that the Native American tribes were treated so brutally was simply because the early settlers not only believed themselves to be Israel, but they also believed that the Indians were the Canaanites, and therefore they had to be destroyed. From these racist acts, much shame and disgrace was brought upon Christianity. Even today, these facts make it difficult for Christians to justify the doctrine that many believe brings so much pain, misery, and death.
That's true, because if this ever does come up in discussion with someone who is aware of their history, it is a black mark, and who would want to be a part of that? Who would want to be a part of such death and again, pain, misery, and death? And nobody would want to. So unless you understand the spiritual side, you're fighting a losing battle. If you're fighting a losing battle against anybody that knows history, if you run into an atheist that knows history, he's going to cut you to shreds, because he's going to show you the Trail of Tears, and he's going to show you a bunch of other stuff. If you don't understand the spiritual aspect of these things, then you're going to fall prey to it, and that's a large reason. Well, I mean, a lot of these young people, let's say, that are leaving the church or never even went into the church, they've got their YouTubes and stuff, and they'll go on there, and they'll look, and they'll see the Trail of Tears and what was behind it, and then they say, I don't want nothing to do with that. Mm-hmm. And you can't blame them. But if you can show them the spiritual side, then that, of course, that's where it's always been. It's not just like we discovered it recently. But if you can show them the spiritual side of what should have happened, or what is happening in the spirit, then of course, there's no case to be brought against that.
Well, it still even goes in today. America's over; they're always backing Israel.
Yeah,
fighting against the Muslims.
Yeah,
and you could say the same thing about that. They're
look at Donald Trump. He opened the embassy up, and he done it on the very day, 70 years.
Oh yeah.
He announced it. If
1948.
He announced it in 2017, which was 70 years after the UN made their declaration.
Yeah.
But then in 1948, they actually enforced it. It actually became law, if you will.
Yeah.
And so he done the same thing. He announced the embassy.
Right.
And then in 2018, he actually opened it up.
Yeah, and you know that it's
They
not
did
going
it
to be
because,
long.
yeah.
It's not going to be long before they rebuild the temple, physical temple, over, I'm sure.
Let me tell you, when that happens, it's going to be because there's going to be a lot of people fall for it. A lot of people fall for it. They're not going to understand that the temple is spiritual.
Right.
If they do build that temple, watch out. It's going to be it's going to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Especially these Zionist Christians that maybe even they don't even realize that they're Zionist Christians. But the Israel Firsters, they are going to have an absolute cow.
Yeah.
I mean, just to borrow a term from the 1980s, they're going to have a cow. Yeah, and it's already getting crazy. But watch out if the temple goes up.
Well, you've got Israel over there, the physical Israel occupying stealing all the land off the Palestinians, just like happened over here, just like we're talking about here.
Right, because this isn't just America. I mean, we're talking a lot about America because we're Americans, and that's what we know. But this you can find this through anywhere Christians have went and settled. You can find this type of a theme flowing through that, and unfortunately, the theme is always physical. It's always we got to beat this guy up and take his land.
Oh yeah.
It's never spiritual, which is a whole different aspect and what this whole book has been about. If you haven't listened to the whole series, I would hope you can go back and listen to it, because the whole series is driving you towards showing you that it's spiritual, and physical is done. Physical is over. Physical is a dead body laying in a casket, a corpse laying in a casket. The life is in the spirit, because the next chapter, or the next part of this chapter, is about England. And some of the things that happened in England when they way back in the 1600s, and I didn't go too far into it. This is just right after the King James Bible was written, or was translated. So you see this theme, like you said. It's in Israel today. It was in America. Maybe it still is in America to a degree. And it was in England too.
The thing, American so-called Christians don't see the ones that are fooled by the nation-state of Israel, the counterfeit Israel. They won't raise a finger. They see all these Israel soldiers killing all these Muslims and everything, and it's okay. It's okay with them. They're all these American soldiers killing the Muslims. They're fine with that.
But if anybody attacks Israel, watch out.
Yeah, watch out.
If they throw a rock back at Israel, that's bad.
Yeah, that's bad. World's fixing to come to end.
Yeah, but if they shoot a rocket launcher back into the crowd or something, then that's all right. They're defending themselves.
But Israel's been, the true Israel's been killed ever since. Well, it started with Stephen.
Yeah.
He's telling them the truth, and they killed him. And then the disciples, all of them were killed.
Well, that's the missing element in all of Christianity. And today, you can't even say that. Today, it's even worse. You can't even make that analogy anymore. But the missing thing in Christianity, even in these guys' times, 1800, 1700, and even 1600s here, these guys, they knew, they had it. They had figured it out. They were, I'm sure, very influenced by this idea. But even then, they couldn't get past the idea of it being physical. And I keep saying the same thing over and over and over, but that's exactly what they did. They were Christians without the Spirit. Is that the best way to put it? They appeared to be Christians, but they weren't Christians.
Right.
Because they weren't born again. Jesus said you must be born again of the Spirit. What is born of the Spirit is spirit, and what's born of the flesh is flesh.
Yeah, if they were truly born again, they wouldn't be killing
Right.
Killing anybody.
Right, because they're already dead.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Is these people who reject Jesus are already dead.
Yeah.
They're literally the Walking Dead.
They are.
That's the reason the Walking Dead is so popular.
They're
because
earth dwellers.
Yeah, they're earth dwellers. and the Bible says that we dwell in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to explain this to a guy the other day, and he could not understand what I was talking about. He was saying, "Yeah, I dwell in heaven." Well, yeah, after you die, no, I'm there now.
Yeah.
Oh, so he couldn't get his mind around what I was trying to say. It's all in the Spirit.
The kingdom of God is within us.
It's within us, exactly, and people don't get that. People
No.
don't understand that, and that's a huge concept. Because normally we'll look up and point up into the sky. Oh, heaven,
Yeah.
heaven's up there somewhere. Well, it tells you plainly, it's
Yeah.
inside you.
Right.
So we're looking in the wrong direction,
Mm-hmm.
which that is very surprising that we'd
No.
be looking in the wrong direction. That seems to be what we're really good at.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? England as Israel. John K. Hale's book, England as Israel, in Milton's writings, looks at the concept of believers in England during the 1600s who also thought they were Israel. We see this period in England's history also marred by war. Oliver Cromwell, after converting to Puritanism in the 1630s, was often considered Moses to England's Israel. In his book, Hale states, once Cromwell had become head of state, the image of England as Israel on Exodus under Moses acquired new force. While these believers may have been chosen, they did not realize they were spiritually chosen, so they made it all about the flesh. Unfortunately, the church today makes the same mistake, but instead of thinking American or British believers are the chosen people, they think the physical Jews are. The error is they are all looking to the flesh. So the same crop of racism, which brought us so many terrible acts of war and persecution committed in the name of God, is still alive and well in the racist belief that one group of physical people are the chosen people. History shows that this belief never turns out anything but war and death, and that is just where we are headed today. But this time, the Antichrist will be leading the charge, and they will be unstoppable for 3.5 years. Are you ready?
So people don't think about this point either very much, but when you think of a racist, you think of somebody that's against a certain group of people. You never think of a racist being somebody that's for a certain group of people. So to say the Jews are the chosen people and the Jews are superior or whatever, that's a racist view. Now, just the fact that it's sort of backwards. Most time you think of a racist as somebody who hates Jews. Maybe I'm just looking at it from obviously my own point of view, but as an American Gentile in the flesh, when I see other Gentiles looking to one group and thinking they're great, the word racist isn't the first thing that pops into my mind. Now, if I was a Jew and I thought I was better than everybody else, then I guess I wouldn't be shocked to be called a racist. But it's tied to a negative connotation there as far as the viewpoint. And so anyway, it's just something that a lot of people maybe haven't considered. Maybe if you're a Zionist, John Hagee follower, Kufi follower, then you've never considered that your love of Israel is a racist view, but it truly is. So let's see, that's the end of that chapter. We've got a short one here, chapter 15, that's basically just going to sum all this up. And I got to this final chapter, and I had several other chapters in mind that I wanted to do. Rather than make a chapter out of them, I just basically made quotes out of them. Throughout the book, there's 2 or 3 times where I've just made a quote and stuck it in there sort of randomly, and those were actually going to be chapters. But I got to the 15, and I just thought to myself, if they've not got it by now, they're not going to get it. And that's a big theme that runs through the whole book, is that, either you see this or you don't. You're either spiritual or you're flesh. And if you're flesh, it doesn't matter what we say, you're not going to see it. It's like the chapter, the blind man. You can't explain color to a blind man because he just simply cannot see it. So I just wrote this final closing chapter to kind of try to bring that to mind. And I think I actually mentioned here about these other chapters too. So a lot of the things I'm just repeating. So yeah, chapter 15.
All right. They walked no more with him. Well, the book is now complete, and I think of how many other examples I could have gone into, as the Bible is filled with prophecies, parables, references, and outright statements of the fact concerning this topic. The quote from James 1:1, which I used at the beginning of chapter 1, is an example of this. At one time, this simple quote was intended to become an entire chapter of its own, since, as you may have noticed, James addresses the 12 tribes, which has always been a reference to Israel. However, as the old saying goes, it doesn't do any good to beat a dead horse. If you aren't seeing this by now, then you simply aren't going to get it, and an extra chapter or two wouldn't have helped you at all. As I have stated numerous times, the entire essence of the gospel message is tied up in this one understanding, and yet nearly all believers today completely miss and or intentionally ignore it. For those of you who have had your eyes open to this truth and have accepted it, I welcome you. You have heard the truth and responded to His voice. You are most beloved, and you are my brothers and sisters in Christ. But for those who reject this truth, you are not blessed, and as long as you reject the truth, you will be in terrible peril. I am not attempting to sound arrogant when I tell you that this is not simply another opinion for you to consider at your leisure. No one sounds arrogant when they declare 2 plus 2 equals 4 because they are speaking the truth, yet men of God must constantly say, in my opinion, or I believe, or I think, if they wish to remain in high regard within this group. Read church. However, these modifiers make us lukewarm and serve only to weaken and water down God's truth. So you must realize that our opinions mean nothing. There are no opinions here. We have no authority to formulate an opinion concerning the Word of God. Either we have the truth of God and declare it as such, or we don't. This is the one true gospel, and you need it in order to be saved. You simply cannot continue to believe lies and exalt Antichrist within the temple of the living God and stay in God's favor. We must accept this word and obey, or be lost.
So you want to read the part with John here?
In John 6:43 through 66, Jesus therefore answered and said unto them, Murmur not among yourselves. No man can come to me except the Father which hath sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall be all taught of God. Every man therefore that hath heard and hath learned of the Father cometh unto me. Not that any man have seen the Father, save he which is of God, he hath seen the Father. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me hath everlasting life. I am that bread of life. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness, and are dead. This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof, and not die. I am the living bread which come down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. The Jews therefore strove among themselves, saying, How can this man give us his flesh to eat? Then Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, except you eat the flesh of the Son of Man, and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoso eateth my flesh, and drinketh my blood, hath eternal life, and I will raise him up the last day. For my flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood dwelleth in me, and I in him. He that eateth my flesh, as the living Father hath sent me, and I live by the Father, so he that eateth me, even he shall live by me. This is the bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers did eat manna, and are dead. He that eateth of this bread shall live forever. These things said he in the synagogue, and he taught in Capernaum. Many therefore of his disciples, when they had heard this, said, This is an hard saying, who can hear it? When Jesus knew in himself that his disciples murmured at it, he said unto them, Doth this offend you? What? And if you shall see the Son of Man ascend up where he was before? It is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit, and they are life. But there are some of you that believe not, for Jesus knew from the beginning who they were that believed not, and who should betray him. And he said, Therefore said I unto you, that no man can come unto me, except it were given unto him of my Father. From that time many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. The end.
And I think that's interesting. James Lloyd, Christian Media Network, made a point on this show one time, and that is so interesting that here at this last verse, that his disciples went back and walked no more with him. He's talking about the multitudes of disciples, not the 12.
Yeah.
The verse is in John 6:66. I always thought that was funny when he pointed that out. I'm like, wow. I mean, John 6:66. Yeah. It says they walk no more with Jesus. That's mainly why I chose that quote, I suppose, because a lot of people are going to read, well, maybe not a lot of people are going to read this book, but those that do, going to be a lot of those who reject it. They can't, wow, you're just saying the craziest stuff. I mean, this is ridiculous. Jesus is the blood and the bread, and I've got to eat Jesus. No, I just can't do that. I'm not a cannibal. I'm not going to go there, and they just can't see it. And that's what they're doing when they reject this teaching. Yeah. Exactly what it is.
That's kind of like they can't get the meat of the Scripture. They stay in the milk.
Every service is another come to the altar service.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Always the same thing, pretty much. I mean,
I went to church for years, and every service, we had a small church. I mean, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody been at the altar 50 times, but yet at the end of the sermon, if you got anything in your heart, you think maybe you're not saved, you need to come on down. I'm like, how many times are we going to get saved here,
It's just a regurgitation of Billy Graham, and he got that from Billy Sunday, and, that's where they get it.
That's exactly where they got it. They realized that the peer pressure that conjured up, if you get somebody to raise their hand, you're going to have a lot more power to get them up to the altar, and that's going to make you look like a good preacher.
Yeah.
It's all communism, really. I didn't realize Billy Sunday was that involved in it, but I know that he was basically, wasn't he like Billy Graham's mentor, almost like where they
Billy Graham supposedly got saved at a Billy Sunday revival, and that's where I guess he started doing it.
Now the thing about Billy Graham is, it seems that in the very, very, very beginning, he was actually sincere.
Yeah,
and he was really trying to. It's the truth. I don't know about his rapture doctrines and everything. I'm sure he's always been a rapturist, which is just. But if you don't know any better, you can overlook mistakes if a person don't know any better. But when you bring them the facts and they still reject it, that's when you get in trouble. But now, just as far as being a preacher that tried to tell the truth, I think he started out pretty good.
Yeah.
And for 2 or 3 years or more, a little bit more, maybe.
And then they got a hold of him.
They got a hold of him. He started hanging out with all these presidents and everything.
Yeah.
And, well, there you go.
I can't remember the guy's name, but anyway. You can go watch a video on YouTube, and it's called "Most Christians Are Going to Hell," and that explains a lot.
About remember who done that?
Not right off. I can't remember the guy's name.
You just type that in, though, it'll come up.
Most Christians are going to hell. Yeah, and it'll show that.
But I will say there may be other videos that are named that. Like we were talking earlier, our own videos, we like to call them the Remnant of Israel, the true gospel of Jesus Christ. And of course, you type that in, and lo and behold, there's apparently millions
I think
of true gospels of Jesus Christ. So I'm like, I wish we could change our name. Maybe we will. Not our name as far as we're called the Remnant of Israel. We won't change that, but the title as far as trying to say the true gospel. It just, when you got 10 million people all saying the same thing, no one's going to stop and look and say, let's look into this one guy here. He says he's the true gospel. He's got the true gospel, but then so do all these other people. And you go and watch some of these other videos, and it's just junk. It's the same old physical junk that you always get. Rapture, the 7-year treaty and all this stuff. And Israel, of course, is the chosen people. Physical Israel.
We're going to be out here before too long. We want to get raptured away. Yeah, we might get raptured on the way home from church.
Right. And you hate to laugh, but
Antichrist comes. They're going to rebuild the temple over in Israel, and then Antichrist come in there and sacrifice the pig and all this.
Right, and he'll have his
stuff.
treaty with him, 7-year treaty, and of course he'll break it. He'll bring that pig in there.
He'll read you another Hal Lindsey book.
Yeah.
That's what all that stuff. That's where people get it, most of it, and then your preachers. They ain't gonna tell you the truth. They don't know the truth.
They don't know the truth. Exactly.
Hasn't been revealed to them. They just regurgitate what they've always learned in seminar or heard from another preacher, Billy Graham.
And that's bad enough. That is really terrible, as a matter of fact, that the preacher wouldn't already be aware of these things. But what bothers me, and this happened several times, is that once you tell them, rather than being humble and going and praying about it, and say, they immediately come against it.
Yeah.
Well, look how many people come against. James is attacked all the time, and we're not really big enough to be attacked. But the few people that know about us, we've been attacked, how you can look it square in the eye and then still come against it. That's what bothers me. It's not that people are wrong. You can be wrong all day long, and I'm sure that there's things that I'm sure there's some things that I'm wrong about, even though I don't. If I knew about them, I would obviously change them. So what I'm saying is, if I'm wrong, which I know I'm wrong, I just don't know where I'm wrong.
You want to look into it, right?
Yeah, right. If someone brought it to my attention, then it's like we were talking about earlier with the before we started the broadcast about the King James version. Its history, and then compared to the Sinaitic of
Codex Sinaiticus.
That version, and you can trace both of the histories. So ultimately, with King James, you end up with the Textus Receptus. So you're comparing the Textus Receptus to the Sinaiticus, and you go back and you find that one of them comes through the Gnostics, and you go to the other one, you find it basically drops off at the doorstep of the crucifixion. So then you ask yourself, which one am I going to follow? The one that goes back to Paul and actually all the way back to Stephen and Jesus' resurrection, or do you go to the one that was uncovered in the Sinai Peninsula in one of those cathedrals or something?
Yeah, come out of Egypt.
And so, so you're. You've got a clear choice. Now you see the facts, and then people still decide to go with the weaker of the two facts. I don't understand that at all.
That's pride. Their pride is.
It must be.
Yeah, has to be.
So what are they worshiping all along? They're really, even when they're on fire and they think they've got the truth, they're really just they're lovers of themselves. They don't want to be in line with the truth.
Another Jesus.
It's like when I found out about Christmas, and I'm not trying to lift myself up, but I'm just saying that this is what I consider typical behavior. If you're going along and you think Christmas is great, and I used to, when I had a little opportunity to put up a little sign down here I had a little restaurant one time, and I had a sign out front. Well, at Christmas time, I put Christ is King. I'd go out there and I'd have a big old sign. I made sure the whole neighborhood knew Christ is King. And it wasn't long after that I realized what Christmas was. It was a pagan lie. It had nothing to do with Jesus.
Yeah.
So that changed me, and now I won't even go to Christmas. I won't even go to a Christmas party. Now they have Christmas party at work or whatever. I won't even go to it. They'll get mad at me and everything, but I got to get over it because I'm not going to. Because I've been changed. See, it wasn't that I'm gonna. Well, now I'm gonna just make Christmas change to fit me. I'm trying. I'm not really making sense here, like I want to, but I try to anyway, to let the truth change me instead of me changing the truth. Because a lot of people go to Christmas and say, "Oh well, we've got a baby Jesus hanging on the tree, so that makes it okay." No. What you need to do is let the truth change you to be a copy of it, not the other way around. The same with Easter and heaven forbid Halloween, and now that one's always been an easy one. But but Christians just bring that in too. They do their trunk or treats.
No,
Craziness.
That's Christianizing it.
Christianizing it.
Yeah.
Making it okay. And so how somebody, and it shouldn't be that amazing to me because most people do this. Most people will do just the opposite. They read about Christmas and they'll just try to forget about it, or they'll just that ain't no big deal or whatever, and just keep right on going.
Yeah, if you put they believe if you put the Christian name or Christianize it in their eyes that it's okay. They've even had a thing, this has been a while, strippers for Jesus.
Yeah. Strippers for Jesus, come on in.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, now I know there's Christian nude beaches.
And Christian tattoos. Hey, I got Christian tattoos on my arm. You know,
must be going to heaven.
Some Christian liquor. It's not funny, but it is.
It ain't, but it is, you know, I mean, because the ridiculousness of it. I mean, that's where you end up. You start out just a little small something, and then you end up at the Christian nude beach, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Where all the Christians are hanging out,
and
literally.
You gotta be kidding. Hey, Christian nude beach.
Apparently there's multiple Christian nude beaches. You know, and like you said, strippers for Jesus and everything else. They just, any kind of abomination that you want to come up with.
Yeah.
We got room for it. Come on in.
Well, Adam and Eve at least seen their sin, and they tried to cover themselves with a fig leaf. And
right.
These people, they have no shame. No shame at all.
Absolutely. And when Adam and Eve, when they sinned, that's exactly right. They were immediately aware of they didn't have anything on, and they were ashamed. Nowadays, they're not ashamed anymore. And that's been we were talking about the Tavistock Institute earlier too, and that was one of the things. Nudity was one of the things that they were big on. They wanted to figure out some way to make it normal to not wear any clothes out in public in front of everybody. And by golly, they did it.
Yeah, you can see how things have changed from go back to the 20s. If you wore a dress that uncovered your ankles,
oh yeah,
you know that
you were bad.
Bad. I think if you didn't wear a hat, you had to wear a hat. And if you didn't wear a hat, you was a prostitute. They showed that you was a prostitute.
And probably gloves as well. But gloves were real big back then.
Yeah. And now,
they were still wearing gloves in the 50s.
Now you got girls coming out wearing hardly anything, and
well, they'll go into a store with a bikini on.
Yeah.
You know, it just
it's ridiculous.
Well, it's went, like you said, from the smallest, the first little inch they rose up on that skirt.
Yeah.
Back in, like you said, I think you said the 20s. From that point, it was over. The camel hat, that was the point when the camel's nose got under the tent, as they say.
Right.
As soon as the camel gets his nose under the tent, it ain't long before you got the whole camel in the tent.
It's all over with.
Yeah, and
Back when I used to go to church, like I was telling you a while ago, you could see girls come in with mini skirts that barely cover their hind ends up, and you got all this cleavage showing. And what are they? Come on, guys.
did you read about that? I forget which church it is, but apparently they've got now a service. I get there's this woman. They hang her from the ceiling, and I guess she doesn't have anything on. Maybe she's got fake wings or something, and she's like an angel or something. I don't know, but apparently, and this was just recently, that they were defending that. And what they said people people should be able to use their talents to serve the Lord. And apparently this woman's talent was that she was really good looking. So she should be able to show off that body and glorify God with her naked body in front of all them men that's coming in there. Now that's the logic that they try to use. And then as soon as you say, no, that's an abomination. Oh, you can't use your talents. They'll try to make you the bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
You're the bad guy because you don't want a woman hanging naked from the ceiling pretending she's an angel or whatever. And I know that our wives ain't going to enjoy that.
Right.
So they don't want us in there looking at that. But hey, you can justify it like that, and then you're gonna come into that service. I tell you what, it's a wonder that we make it at all.
I know.
Well, I guess we're about to wrap this thing up. We're getting around about 50 minutes, so it worked out pretty good. You got any final last words?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can tell everyone wants to listen to this, you better, well, how we was talking about the world's gotten to this point. Well, especially this country we're living in. It's just, God's going to take the wrath out on it pretty soon. And you better repent.
That reminds me of something.
Come out of your sins and, all right.
I hate to throw this in, but you was talking about how bad, it says in the Gospels that the day of judgment comes, that it'll be easier on Sodom and Gomorrah than it'll be on the generation that rejects all this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're already at that point, Sodom and Gomorrah, pretty much.
You've already passed them up.
Yeah. I seen a video the other day, Major League Baseball. I quit watching it about 3 years ago. The Cubs tied the game up, and whenever they come in, whenever he ran around, he knocked a home run. He ran around, and you know how they were always high-fiving and doing the forearm bash and crap like that. Now they're doing a penis bump.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, and all these.
Oh my goodness!
It won't be long for minor league teams probably be doing this. And no, I ain't kidding you. I ain't kidding.
How do you keep from throwing up when that?
Yeah.
So that's going to be normal. So all the little leaguers are going to be doing it.
Oh yeah.
Because they look up to these guys.
Nobody blink. I mean, yeah.
Well, I've never seen that, but I cannot imagine how disgusting that must look.
I seen this 2 nights ago. A guy that I'm friends with on Facebook posted it, and yeah, I ain't kidding.
Well, that shouldn't surprise me. Again, that shouldn't surprise me, but it does.
Part of that's another part of your gay agenda coming out there.
And more so than that, the transgender.
Transgender.
They don't know whether they're a boy or a girl.
Yeah. And then you got these transgender people, or whatever you want to say they are, coming into school reading the kindergarten class and dressed up as a demon.
Yeah,
and that's fine. That's okay. But you know, you got a Christian guy not wanting to bake a gay cake, and they go all to pieces over that. You know.
Yeah, can't have that, but we can have a transvestite come in and teach kindergarten.
Yeah, that goes back to Isaiah 5:20. You know, if I could find that real quick. It's getting worse and worse by the day, by the second.
Yeah, and judgment's coming. I mean, judgment is coming. Whether you think it is or not, it's coming.
says Isaiah 5:20 says, "Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." And that's what's going on right now, more than ever. I mean,
Well, the world's upside down.
it is, and that's what the Bible says, that will be turned upside down. And you got people speaking the truth out here, speaking the truth, and we're the bad guys. Anybody that is speaking the truth are the bad guys, but anybody that's telling you a lie, those are the good guys nowadays.
I seen a meme the other day that said, "The truth sounds like hate to those who hate truth." And I thought, man, that really hits the head on the nail on the head.
Yeah.
If you hate the truth, then it's going to sound like hate speech.
Yeah.
And you're going to want to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's the truth, oh well, that's just, that has to be overlooked, apparently. But here we finally finished this now, and it's out there for people to, it's out there. It ain't getting a lot of attention, and we never expected it to. In fact, I think if you go back and listen to our first couple of videos, we knew it wasn't going to get any attention.
Right.
And that was way back about the time Donald Trump got elected. I think is when we started this, and it's out there now. The proof is posted, and our job is over as far as that goes, and we'll move on to something else. But people don't want it. They don't want it. You can't force it on them. But it's there all the same, and we tried our best to give you the truth as clearly as we could. And a lot of times I've looked back on some of the videos, and I felt wish we could have maybe got it a little bit more clear. But hey, that just is the way. It's just the way it is. You can do the best you can.
It is what it is. We ain't no professionals.
No, there's no professional. We're just two guys with a microphone, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And thanks to the technology, we've got an outlet, and we're small enough that we're flying under the radar, and we're not getting banned because we're not drawing that much attention. But guarantee you, if this was to gain attention, we would be banned.
Oh yeah.
That we would be called anti-Semite or something, and then they'd get rid of us. So here it is. It's there for you. There's, I don't know, how many did we do? 15 videos? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Maybe not that many, because
Maybe
we
13.
doubled.
I think we put 2 on one.
Right.
Couple of them.
And we did 2 tonight too. So
yeah.
All right then. We're right up against our hour, so I guess we might as well call it quits. Did you get to finish your comments? I interrupted you there.
No, I finished pretty much everything.
Okay.
Pretty much what I was going to say there.
All right. Well, we wish you well, and bless those of you who hear the message, who have heard it. Those who don't, we tried.
We'll be praying for the remnant of Israel, all you remnant of Israel out there.
Amen. Yep. Hope that you will pray for us as well. All right, then. It's time to, I guess that's it.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. We'll see you later.